Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has been upbeat about the UK's economic recovery from the pandemic. He has claimed that the country is bouncing back faster than expected, and that his policies have supported millions of jobs and businesses. But how realistic is his optimism? How does it square with the reality of high inflation, rising interest rates, and the cost of living crisis that many Britons are facing? Inflation is the rate at which prices increase over time. It affects how much people can buy with their money, and how much debt they have to pay back. A moderate level of inflation is considered healthy for the economy, as it encourages spending and investment. But too high or too low inflation can be harmful, as it can erode people's purchasing power, distort market signals, and create uncertainty. The UK's inflation rate has surged to 5.1% in November 2021, the highest level since 2011. This means that the average prices of goods and services have risen by 5.1% in a year. The main drivers of this increase are higher energy and fuel costs, supply chain disruptions, and labor shortages. These factors have pushed up the costs of production and transportation for many businesses, which have then passed them on to consumers. Rishi Sunak has argued that inflation is a temporary phenomenon, caused by global factors that are beyond his control. He has said that he expects inflation to peak soon and then fall back to the Bank of England's target of 2%. He has also praised the Bank of England for taking action to curb inflation by raising its main interest rate from 0.1% to 0.25% in December 2021, the first increase since 2018. However, some economists and analysts have challenged Sunak's optimism. They have warned that inflation could remain high for longer than he anticipates, as some of the underlying causes are not likely to disappear soon. They have also pointed out that higher interest rates could hurt the economy by making borrowing more expensive for households and businesses. This could dampen consumer spending and business investment, which are crucial for economic growth. Moreover, high inflation and rising interest rates could worsen the cost of living crisis that many Britons are already facing. The cost of living crisis refers to the situation where people's incomes are not keeping up with their expenses, making it harder for them to afford their basic needs and wants. The cost of living crisis has been exacerbated by the pandemic, which has reduced many people's incomes and savings, while increasing their bills and debts. According to a recent survey by YouGov, more than half of Britons say they are struggling to cope with the rising cost of living. Many people have reported cutting back on essentials such as food, heating, and clothing, as well as on discretionary items such as holidays, entertainment, and gifts. Some people have also resorted to borrowing more money or using their savings to make ends meet. Rishi Sunak has acknowledged that people are feeling the pinch of higher prices, but he has insisted that his government is doing everything it can to help them. He has highlighted some of his measures such as increasing the national living wage, extending the universal credit uplift, freezing fuel duty, and providing grants and loans to businesses. He has also promised to deliver a budget in March 2022 that will focus on supporting jobs and growth. But how effective are these measures? How much do they offset the impact of high inflation, rising interest rates, and the cost of living crisis? And how sustainable are they in the long term? These are some of the questions that Rishi Sunak's optimism on the economy is challenged by reality. In this section, we will examine how Rishi Sunak's claims of household income growth and Brexit benefits are disputed by experts and data. The Chancellor has been accused of being out of touch with the reality of the cost of living crisis that is affecting millions of people in the UK. He has also been criticised for citing cheap beer and sanitary products as examples of the benefits of Brexit, while ignoring the negative impacts on trade, jobs, and prices. One of Sunak's main arguments is that household income is outperforming expectations and that his tax and duty cuts will boost living standards. He announced a 5p litre cut in fuel duty, a £3,000 increase in the threshold for national insurance contributions and a 1p cut in income tax to 19p, which will come into force in April 2024. He said these measures would benefit the average worker by about £6 a week and claimed they were the biggest package of tax cuts in a quarter of a century. However, these claims are challenged by several sources of evidence. First, the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility (OBR) said that the spring statement had given back only a sixth of the tax increases announced by Sunak during his 2 years as Chancellor, and that even after these measures, living standards would fall by more than 2% this year, what it said would be the steepest drop since records began in the 1950s. The OBR also forecast that inflation would rise to 8.5% by the end of this year, eroding the value of wages and benefits. Second, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS, think tank said that Sunak had done nothing more for those dependent on benefits, the very poorest, besides a small amount of extra cash for local authorities to dispense at their discretion. The IFS pointed out that pensioners and those on universal credit would see their incomes fall in real terms as their benefits were not fully indexed to inflation. It also said that Sunak's income tax cut would mainly benefit higher earners and widen inequality. Third, various data sources show that household income growth has been weak or negative for many groups in recent years. According to the Office for National Statistics, ONS, real household disposable income per head fell by 0.6% in 2020 and by 1.6% in the first quarter of 2021. The ONS also reported that median household income fell by 2.3% between 2019-20 and 2020-21, with lower income groups experiencing larger falls than higher income groups. Moreover, a study by the Resolution Foundation think tank found that typical incomes for working-age households were no higher in 2019-20 than they were in 2007-2008, before the financial crisis. Another argument that Sunak has made is that Brexit has delivered benefits for consumers and businesses, such as lower prices and more opportunities. He cited examples such as cheaper beer and sanitary products, which are no longer subject to EU tariffs or VAT. He also said that Brexit had enabled the UK to strike new trade deals with countries such as Australia and New Zealand. However, these arguments are also disputed by experts and data. First, many economists have argued that the costs of Brexit outweigh any benefits, especially in the short term. They have pointed out that Brexit has increased trade barriers and bureaucracy with the EU, which is still the UK's largest trading partner, leading to higher costs, delays and disruptions for businesses and consumers. They have also warned that Brexit could reduce foreign investment, productivity and innovation in the UK economy. Second, various data sources show that Brexit has had a negative impact on trade, jobs and prices. According to the ONS, UK exports to the EU fell by 18.1% in 2020 and by 12.7% in January 2021 compared with January 2020. The ONS also reported that UK imports from the EU fell by 13.9% in 2020 and by 28.8% in January 2021 compared with January 2020. Moreover, a survey by the British Chambers of Commerce found that nearly half of UK exporters reported difficulties in trading with the EU in the first quarter of 2021. Third, some of Sunak's examples of Brexit benefits are questionable or misleading. For instance, while beer and sanitary products may be cheaper due to lower tariffs or VAT, other goods such as food, clothing and cars may be more expensive due to higher tariffs or non-tariff barriers with the EU. Furthermore, while Sunak claimed that new trade deals with Australia and New Zealand would create new opportunities for UK businesses and consumers, some analysts have argued that these deals would have a negligible impact on UK GDP and could harm UK farmers due to increased competition from cheaper imports. In conclusion, we have seen how Rishi Sunak's optimism on the economy is challenged by reality. His claims of household income growth and Brexit benefits are disputed by experts and data, which show that many people are facing a cost of living crisis and that Brexit has had a negative impact on trade, jobs and prices. In this section, we will examine how Rishi Sunak's 5 promises on economy, health and immigration are seen as unrealistic or insufficient by critics and the public. We will look at each promise in turn and explore the challenges and controversies that the Prime Minister faces in delivering them. First, Mr. Sunak pledged to have inflation this year to ease the cost of living and give people financial security. However, this promise has been met with skepticism by economists and opposition parties, who argue that inflation is largely driven by global factors beyond the government's control, such as energy prices, supply chain disruptions and labor shortages. They also point out that the government's own policies, such as raising taxes and cutting benefits, have contributed to the squeeze on household incomes and spending power. Some experts warn that having inflation could require drastic measures, such as raising interest rates or cutting public spending, that could harm the economic recovery and hurt the most vulnerable. Second, Mr. Sunak promised to grow the economy, creating better-paid jobs and opportunity right across the country. He claimed that his government has delivered record levels of investment, innovation and infrastructure, and that Britain is leading the world in sectors such as green technology, life sciences and fintech. However, this promise has been challenged by critics who say that the government has failed to address the deep-rooted inequalities and regional imbalances that plague the UK economy. They also accuse the government of neglecting key sectors such as manufacturing, retail and hospitality, which have been hit hard by the pandemic and Brexit. Moreover, they question whether the government's post-Brexit trade deals have delivered any tangible benefits for British businesses and workers. Third, Mr. Sunak vowed to make sure that the national debt is falling so that he can secure the future of public services. He said that his government has taken tough decisions to balance the books and restore fiscal discipline after a decade of unprecedented borrowing and spending. However, this promise has been criticized by opponents who say that the government has imposed unfair and regressive tax rises on working people and businesses, while protecting the wealthy and powerful. They also argue that the government has cut vital public services and social security support, leaving millions of people worse off and vulnerable to poverty and hardship. Furthermore, they warn that the government's obsession with debt reduction could undermine the long-term growth potential of the economy and jeopardize its ability to respond to future shocks and crises. Fourth, Mr. Sunak pledged to cut NHS waiting lists and ensure that people get the care they need more quickly. He said that his government has invested record amounts of money in the health service, hired more doctors and nurses, and built new hospitals and clinics. However, this promise has been disputed by critics who say that the NHS is facing an unprecedented crisis of capacity, staff shortages and burnout, exacerbated by the pandemic and Brexit. They also claim that the government has failed to tackle the underlying causes of ill health, such as poverty, poor housing and environmental pollution. Moreover, they accuse the government of undermining public trust in the NHS by pursuing a privatization agenda and opening up the health service to foreign competition. Fifth, Mr. Sunak promised to pass new laws to stop small boats carrying illegal migrants across the Channel from France. He said that his government has taken a firm stance on border security and immigration enforcement, and that he will work with international partners to tackle the root causes of migration. However, this promise has been denounced by critics who say that the government's approach is cruel, inhumane and ineffective. They argue that the government has failed to provide safe and legal routes for refugees and asylum seekers fleeing war, persecution and violence. They also allege that the government has violated international law and human rights by detaining migrants in unsanitary conditions, deporting them without due process, and using force against them at sea. These are some of the ways that Rishi Sunak's 5 promises on economy, health and immigration are seen as unrealistic or insufficient by critics and the public. In conclusion, we have seen that while the Prime Minister has set out an ambitious agenda for 2023, he faces significant challenges and controversies in delivering it.